By the count of three, you can kind of lean in. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Let's check it out. Let's check it out. Nice, lovely smile. Just turn out okay.
Alice, you ready?
Okay. Did it turn out okay?
Yeah, I turned out
okay. Okay, good. You're welcome.
For the graduate.
Alice, ready?
Are we ready?
Yep.
Okay. Where's all the Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Good morning. Very, very good. We want to welcome you to our 4th day of our Diversity Inclusion Week. Let's talk, listen, learn, and lead. Today we are talking about cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation. But I'm chair of the Diversity Inclusion Week. I just want to inform you with all this lovely rain. You feel it? Okay. We are still having our Diversity Festival this evening in this building, in front of the auditorium, outside the auditorium, and the patio. Our whole objective and purpose is to bring people together. And we are doing that by having the deans and directors prepare hamburgers, hot dogs, veggie burgers, salads, cookies, just a lot of stuff. And we have a lot of different entertainment and a lot of different activities. So this is all free, and this is an opportunity for you to come celebrate this week and hang out with your friends as well as your teachers. So again, from 5 to 7, you don't want to miss it. So tell everybody, okay? Are you going to do that? Okay, and welcome this morning. I'm going to turn it now over to our moderators.
Thank you. Good morning. Well, thank you for coming. We appreciate it. I haven't seen this many cameras trained on anybody in a long time, so hopefully I'll give you some good pictures. So today we're talking about cultural appropriation versus appreciation. We'll introduce the panel and then we'll get started. Just a couple housekeeping issues. You'll see 2 sheets of paper. We are going to make this a little interactive, so there will be some questions in here and answers. And we'll keep going. I promise you we'll keep this on time. So feel free to stop anytime, ask questions, talk. This is an open dialogue, really kind of free flowing and going. So we'll start with our panel. Thomas, if you want to kick us off.
Hi everyone, my name is Thomas Tran. I'm an MA student in the Department of Anthropology here.
Hi, I'm Idil Isaac. I am a doctoral student in the Anthropology department.
I'm Swamy. I'm an assistant professor in Anthropology.
Hi everyone, my name is Jonathan Chaffen. I am a junior here at the University of Tennessee, majoring in communication studies and minoring in music business.
I'm Mark Geller. I'm the Director of Development for the college. So with that said, we'll move on. So before, the first question we have for you is, how many of you guys know what cultural appropriation appreciation is? You can just show by hands. Okay, perfect. Does anyone want to offer? We'll start by, what's your definition of, and we'll start with cultural appreciation. Just go ahead and throw out a couple ideas, any definitions you have, keywords, feel free to share. Okay.
Celebrating cultures other than your own.
Anybody else? Anybody? Need a couple more. Somebody? Anybody? I'm going to start pointing. I got a laser pointer, and that's not good when I have a laser pointer because I'll start picking on people. Anybody? Come on.
Somebody.
Panel, throw us out a couple.
I mean, just to make it easier for you guys, name some ways that you practice cultural appreciation.
Good way to phrase it.
In your day-to-day lives, I guess.
Well, it's going throughout the culture, not just in the African American community.
Box spread. Great. We'll touch on that. Yes.
I don't qualify with food. I like foods that aren't necessarily relevant.
Okay. We'll bounce down to cultural appropriation. Anybody? Definition? Somebody? Yes. Thank you. No, please.
That's stealing someone else's cultural norms and claiming them as your own.
Anybody else? Got a laser pointer. Come on, somebody, anybody? Panel?
I'll define it as stealing positive aspects of a culture without taking into consideration the negative aspects.
I know you got a definition.
Me?
Yes.
I mean, what Thomas said is a great summation of what cultural appropriation is. But I mean, I would say, for example, consuming hip-hop music without acknowledging the systematic racism, the structural racism that exists within society, right? So separating the consumption of people's culture over without acknowledging the other bigger issues that happen in society. So.
Okay.
I would say cultural appropriation is happens in a context where there's a relationship of power, where there's an inequality in society, and one takes from a party that's weaker and ignores that inequality in the process and reproduces that inequality in the process. Sorry, it sounds very definition-like, but that's roughly what I think about when I think about appropriation. I'm thinking about power.
Okay. Thank you. So things to look, we'll keep the board up, keep an idea as we go through. So what we'll do now is move forward. We've, as a panel, have a few definitions. We've kind of came that are broad-based, but then we'll go into individual instances and we'll talk through them. That's why we'll use the sheets. So cultural appropriation, a few things. The act of taking or using things from a culture that is not your own, especially without showing that you understand or respect this culture. Second kind of definition is that we cited the unacknowledged or inappropriate adoption of the customs, practices, ideas. And then it touches on of one people or society by members of another, and typically more dominant people or society. So, any questions on that? Appreciation is when elements of a culture are used while honoring the source they came from. It's important to note that appreciation involves respecting value. Okay, this is the next part. So you got two sheets of paper, pink and green, where we show the next picture and just show whether you think it's appreciation or appropriation. So a little pretext before we get into this. These are just images. We use celebrities. We didn't go through your Facebook or Twitter page and find anything you did. These are celebrities just showing, using as examples, okay? Appropriation or appreciation? Okay. Anybody wanna, why you chose that? Why, yes, no?
How can we assume that she is appropriating the culture and not appreciating it off her hairstyle? Because, I would argue that hairstyles have become more mainstream as they did become more part of the white culture. The stigmas that went along with them did sort of dissipate some, which goes to, what she said, taking the positive and leaving the negative. But at some point, does the scale not then shift towards, now that it has become mainstream, it's an appreciation? Because, how do we know that she does not recognize where that came from or why? And there's nothing fundamental about a hairstyle that is culturally significant for just one overall.
Any comments?
Sure.
I will say that I don't have a sheet, but I would have raised my hand for appropriation just because when Kim Kardashian wore the braids, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, these things are so cute, and I have no idea what the mainstream culture society has named them, but they're Fulani braids that the culture who wears them actually names them, calls them. So that's where the appropriation comes in, is that, oh my gosh, it's so cute when Kim does it, but then when the people who are of that culture do it, it's labeled as not as cute, not workplace appropriate, not, like she's on the red carpet with this, but if somebody else wore that to the red carpet, then, like when Zendaya had her faux locks for the red carpet, everybody was talking about how she probably stunk. So that's where that comes from.
I would definitely, is this on?
Yes. You go. It's not for here, it's for the.
So, definitely I would agree with what she said. It's not that we're saying that it's bad for you to appreciate or to utilize parts of people's culture is the ways in which you utilize people's culture and not acknowledging the systematic issues that exist within a society. So Kim Kardashian, a woman who would be categorized as white in this society, wears braids, right? She went and wore those braids, but she didn't acknowledge publicly the ways in which Black women's hairstyles and beauty standards are policed and neglected and disrespected by society. Like she said, I don't know the young lady's name, but you know, when you're a Black woman, the hairstyles that you wear traditionally within your culture are things that are not accepted in the U.S., right? So I wouldn't be able to go professionally as a graduate student or in the future as a professor, walk around wearing braids and be still considered professional within academia or just wider, you know, American society. But when Kim Kardashian does it, she's not considered to be unclean, ghetto, urban, these negative traits that are associated with wearing braids or wearing dreadlocks when you're a woman who comes of African descent. So that's the issue here, the double standard of why one person can enjoy and practice something when the original people who traditionally practice that custom are not being allowed to do that.
Yep, sorry, go ahead.
So is there a way that she could have worn these braids on the red carpet and it wouldn't be considered appropriation? Or do you think there's just no way she could have worn it? We're not there yet in the culture. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah. I mean, I think both, yes, we're not there in this society yet for her to be able to do this, but since she did, I think the best and most appropriate thing would have been for her to take that moment of visibility that she has on the red carpet and address that with reporters, right? For when they asked her about her fashion and her hair and the look that she has, which I mean, they generally do at these kind of events, she should have addressed that, right? She should have been like, this is what I'm, you know, wearing. Just like she tells you what designer she's wearing, she should have told you the ethnic background of this, you know, hair that she's wearing, and some of the social issues that exist around it in our society. She should have addressed those things, right? So when you utilize these things, if you can't avoid utilizing them, then you should take on the role of being an advocate and addressing the systematic issues that go along with it.
And I agree with that because appropriation goes beyond just your individual intention on something. Appropriation also deals with society as a whole. So whether or not you have good intentions going into like wearing something like braids or not, you have to understand that society will, if you're a white person wearing braids or dreadlocks, you have to understand that society will elevate you higher than they would elevate like a person of color doing the same thing. So one of the best phrases one of my activist friends ever told me, that it's about impact and not intention. Regardless of your intention, you have an impact when you do something.
To Idil's point though, real quick, when asked about this with Kim, her response was she got the hairstyle from Bo Derek from the movie back in 1979. Bo Derek only did it because it was the part she had to play in the movie. So I guess when had the opportunity to express, she reflected, she went back to something that didn't even acknowledge the culture that she got it from, or the culture that is predominantly in. She used a reference to Bo Derek. If you don't know who Bo Derek is, Google, it's fine. Jonathan had to do the same thing.
I mean, she was a white actress and celebrity, right? So she wore that look in a movie, and so Kim Kardashian, instead of referencing the actual true culture that it came from, she instead referenced the only instance in American cinema back during that time in which a white woman wore those braids, and those braids came to be known as Bo Derek braids in mainstream media, right? So that's the problematic nature of using other people's cultures and not acknowledging that you're using other people's culture, particularly when those are minority groups.
I also think that the assumption that because something's mainstream, that makes it safe is like a very privileged assumption. And I also think that going to the point about impact, if you're someone the impact of you, sporting this fashion is going to be to make it more mainstream without people knowing where it stems from. I think that you are contributing to cultural appropriation.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Everyone's favorite, JT. Appropriation, appreciation. Okay. I think we're pretty much, everyone went pretty much pink on that one. Any conversation, discussion? Is this different? Is it different because Justin did it versus Kim? Is there anything? Okay.
I would point out that Allen Iverson, and it was around a similar time, I think, was called out for his, for his hairstyle and very similar style to that, and actually resulted in rule changes within the NBA because he was dressed as a thug. And so I would say that's definitely something that Justin Timberlake can get away with, but Allen Iverson was called out for that just because of his appearance.
Very valid point. Any comments, questions? Okay.
I would like to say, growing up, coming from where I come from Memphis, South Memphis to be exact. So walking around in school, you were considered a gangbanger, no matter whether the flag was blue, orange, black, yellow. You were considered somebody who was going to make trouble. You were immediately watched, and you were also immediately rejected attendance to school at the door.
I think it just bothers me because I know that if a person of color had that same outfit on a runway, people would assume it to be unprofessional. Or they wouldn't like it. They'd be like, "Oh, he's on a runway. Why is he doing stuff like that?" But because Justin Timberlake does it, it's okay. It's unique and it's different. But it just bothers me.
Just going off what you say, you've been from Memphis. Me being from here, being from the east side, same thing. We wear a headband. Some people wear a headband, keep their hair behind. Like me, I used to have dreads when I was little. I wore a headband. I got suspended because they were saying, "Oh, you're a gangbanger. You're doing this. We can't let you come here," and stuff like that. And then they try to make me get me expelled and all that stuff like this. But to go back, you look at my grades. I was an honor student, AP student, but then they were like, "Well, you're depicting this, so we can't let you be here. You can't be our student if you're wearing stuff like this."
Exactly. Anybody else?
Okay. Another example, doesn't matter if it's just fashion, just on the runway, walking down, it's a style. So in the three, I'll just call them fashion hairstyles, where pretty much everyone seems to agree that it's appropriation. Is there we've had great conversation, is there anything that makes maybe this different because it's just a runway? It's not real, maybe. I don't know. I'm just asking the question.
I feel like the fact that it's on a runway and it's so colorful almost makes it worse because it's almost a mockery. And I forgot who show this was, but
Mark Jacobs.
Yeah, Mark Jacobs. He did it in such a way that was almost like, yeah, I created this. I put yarn in the hair and made it long. Versus that's a cultural thing. I remember having multiple arguments with my mom when I was little about what color I could put in my hair. And it was always had to be something natural because either I couldn't wear it to school or it just looked like she just wouldn't let me do it. So it's a mockery of where we came from.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And I know very little about fashion. And so would it be different if it were a designer who was using this to celebrate this? So was using culturally appropriate models and using it to try and give a voice to their culture? Because I know some designers do that, right? Would that be different?
We actually addressed this later.
Oh, sorry.
But go ahead. We can do it now. But there's an image we talked about today that we used that will come up, and that question is very pertinent to that topic as well. No, it's fine. We can.
So, It would be different if it were, say, a black designer doing this, because that means the power was with the black designer to exercise their agency to share their culture on the runway. Marc Jacobs is a white gay man, and white gay men historically have an issue with appropriating culture from black women. So that's another red flag for that.
And it's also who is on the runway, right? If it's a black designer and they just have just all white models and they're just placing these cultural items and expressions on them, that would also be problematic, right? I mean, you have this trend that's happening in fashion as of lately where they do things like this. They have, there was a point where they're having models wear hijabs on the runway, right? So these things are problematic because A, you're not including the people who traditionally practice these things in these projects, but also you're basically almost commodifying people's struggle, right? Because women, like, it's fashionable to wear hijab on the runway, right? But in society, how are Muslim women who wear hijab treated, right? So those are the kind of things that when you consume fashion or you consume media that you want to be thinking about, so in society you can hold people accountable for the ways in which they appropriate culture or they share culture.
Just to add to that, I was kind of intrigued by your use of the term celebration. Like, what does it mean to celebrate? And I think about celebration as being somewhat inadequate as a term itself, because I wonder whether we should think about solidarity. I mean, does imbibing or mimicking something convey, one just taking it and kind of doing the sort of individualistic thing of celebrating, versus does one stand in solidarity with the culture that is being kind of commented upon or partaken in, right? So I wonder, like, for example, I mean, if when I say solidarity again, it's going back to the problem of power, the problem of inequality. We live in an unequal world, and in this unequal world, when dominant members of society or members of the dominant society take from the oppressed communities certain things, how do they celebrate it unless they actually are doing it as an act of solidarity, which means, again, trying to what Tom said, ceding that space to the members of that oppressed community to speak on behalf of their own culture. Now, instead of taking it and say, I'm celebrating. That's all.
To go back to Idil's point about commodification, an example of a culture that has exercised this type of agency, Japanese culture, they commodified a lot of aspects. Like, for example, wearing a kimono, they actively try to sell kimonos as part of commodifying pieces of their culture. So that's an example of something where, a group is inviting other groups to actively participate, so.
Okay. Does financial economic impact have anything to do with whether it's okay or not okay?
Yes, because this, Marc Jacobs is making money off of this. Instead, black women are getting fired because of this.
Okay. Okay. I think that's standalone. Any questions, comments, anything, conversation, panel, add anything, context to this?
Aside from just like borrowing aspects of a culture, the headdress and other things are considered sacred. And so I think that's something that's very important when you consider, when you try and appreciate another culture, understand what parts are maybe not meant to be like touched. So like a headdress is something that's like a symbol of honor, and so you shouldn't be just wearing it casually.
Referring back to when you were talking about the kimonos and how like they're inviting them to celebrate their culture.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people that go on mission trips to like Haiti or other places like that, and a lot of them will come back with braids in their hair. Would that be considered that, or would that still be cultural?
I mean, okay, so there's layers to that, because mission trips on their own are something that we can have a really long discussion about. But if you get invited to participate in another culture, then that should be okay. But you have to also understand that if someone gives you weird looks, they're warranted to do that, because they have no reason to trust you. Like, if I see someone and, I don't know, they're wearing a traditional Vietnamese dress. Even if they went to Vietnam and like one of their Vietnamese friends gave it to them, I don't know that, and so I don't have any reason to trust that this person didn't appropriate my culture. So that's part of that whole like intention versus impact thing. I mean, they have the best intentions, but I don't have any reason to trust them up front. So, at least not in this current like political like climate.
Just one thing that I kind of like also want to kind of add a note of caution here. I mean, it's not like these are not unchanging things. I mean, these are not things that are like forever true in all contexts. I mean, I'm thinking about English tea. I'm from India originally, and you know, I would imagine like, you know, my dad's generation during colonialism might have hated the idea of English tea, but I don't care about English tea now. I mean, it doesn't bother me, it doesn't hurt my feelings. So again, it's a question of power, because we're not colonial subjects today. Okay, fine, enjoy your what you call English tea. There's no tea growing in England, but it's okay. You know, there's no chocolate growing in, there's no cocoa growing in Europe, but you have Swiss chocolate and all this stuff. But these are appropriations, and they speak to like long kind of, you know, histories of oppression and inequality, colonialism, etc. But I think we should also think about them as potentially changing, and how they can change may have to do with us trying to kind of, you know, move the conversation towards things like solidarity. Move the conversation towards things like addressing the causes of inequality. It's not just about consumption, right? Because all this is about consumption. It's all like high-end capitalist events. You know, people pay big money, and this is, you know, it's about commodity production, sale, exchange, profits, shareholders, and all that stuff. Let's move the conversation more to social relations, improving things, you know, for communities from ground up. And we rethink that, then our exchanges become more about solidarity, about deepening human connections, rather than thinking about, you know, what's the perfect kind of formulaic way to partake in some kind of commodity consumption process.
And just keep in mind that when you have these interactions and experiences with people, like let's say you went to Haiti on this mission trip and, you know, you got braids and they let you get braids and da-da, or you went to India and, you know, people put a sari on you, da-da. Okay, so just because you had that one experience in which a group or one individual within a culture invited you to participate in their culture at a specific moment and, you know, place, it doesn't necessarily give you a license to continue along that path. And I say that in the sense, I mean, just the analogy in general is like, you know, you invite someone to your house one time, right? You invite them, oh, come over, let's, you know, chill, whatever, right? But that invitation was a one-time invitation, right? So wouldn't you be offended if somebody then just started showing up at your house every day? Like, did you invite them indefinitely to your house to make themselves at home? No, right? So think of culture in that way. Understand that one person giving you permission to participate in their culture or a particular aspect of their culture does not mean that you have permission to continue along that path. So, you know, if I invite you to like make some Somali samosas or whatever like that, don't Columbus it. You know, that's a term that was invented a few years ago. Don't Columbus it, right? And then, you know, take it as your own, right? Respect the barriers and borders that kind of exist within that, and maintain the respect of continuing to ask permission from those people of that culture to continue to participate. So ask consent, right? Consent, right? So.
Since you mentioned samosas, I'll just say something here. Okay. How many of you know what a samosa is? You know samosa. I mean, samosas are delicious little spicy pastries, savory, and Idil makes the best samosas. And so, but here's the thing, right? I mean, samosas are, I guess, they're shared, culturally shared dish between North African, Arab and South Asian worlds, right? It has its own history, it's a long history. So lots of things, like you said, samosa, it kind of reminds me again, we all use ketchup, we eat ketchup, right? How many of you know where ketchup came from originally? I mean, it's a condiment that's traced back to the 1700s in Southeast Asia, right? But today it's American culture, right? Every fast food serves you ketchup. You know, ketchup is just some mundane, everyday fact of life associated with the West. In fact, in other parts of the world today, when you talk about ketchup, they say, oh, that's Western food. But, forgetting the deep histories of things moving here and there. Where do tomatoes come from? Well, that's the funny part of the story. It's from Southeast Asia, ketchup, but tomatoes came from the Americas. They made their way all the way. Where does coffee come from? From Africa. Everybody drinks coffee today. We're drinking coffee today. But I just want to add one more little thing. I'm sorry, this is slightly discordant here, but where does this come from? Nestle, right? And I'm thinking Michigan. I'm thinking Flint. Is this a form of cultural appropriation? I want to kind of challenge us to think about cultural appropriation beyond little commodities that, individual consumption of commodities, to thinking about broader issues. Well, people in Flint are drinking poison water and they're risking all kinds of health issues, while this company makes billions of dollars basically having free access to all this water and bottles it and sells it here. I'm not faulting folks who kind of organize this for getting this, but it just reminded me that this is also culture. Isn't it culture? I mean, I don't know, what do you guys think?
Light blue shirt.
I obviously, it probably wouldn't be as impactful, but just a curiosity question. Do you believe cultural appropriation can exist among cultures or countries that are historically white cultures or countries?
Can you rephrase that?
Like, for me, if you're a white person in a historically white country or place, do you believe appropriation of another historically white culture can exist?
Yeah.
So could you guys could Americans in Britain and England with two majority white cultures appropriate each other?
Well, I mean, we St. Patrick's Day, right? That's a huge problematic holiday that exists within the United States that appropriates certain aspects of Irish culture that are not only stereotypes, but I mean, right? We use certain images about Irish culture to promote this particular holiday. So that is one way in which white people in America appropriate white Irish people's culture.
If you tie that again to the question of power, then it becomes a little clearer, right? In a sense, a lot of working class culture within many Western societies, working class culture is always looked down upon, seen as being less, not refined, crude, etc., etc. But working class culture also gets appropriated and sold and commodified, lots of profits made from it once it becomes, part of some mainstream, right? Part of the media, Hollywood, etc., etc. Then it becomes something that can be sold. You can think about it again, but again, the real critical factor there would be power.
And I have a good example of this actually. It's kind of along the lines of what you're talking about. So this summer I was in Italy, and I was at a dinner party, and I was having this pasta, this special type of pasta, and it has this burnt flavor or whatever. So it's considered this delicacy or whatever like that. And I was like, oh, that's interesting that burnt flavored pasta would be this delicacy, right? And so my cousin was explaining to me the history behind how this came to be a delicacy. Okay, so in Italy, you have the peasant class, centuries ago, and so what happened is the wealthy people, after the crops were taken or whatever, they would burn the fields, right? And so some of the peasants would try to salvage some of the crops from what was left of what was burned, right? And they'd use the wheat from the field that was burned to make this pasta, okay? So this pasta came from these poor peasants, right? Reutilizing basically scraps of food, right? And this is what they would eat. This is the type of pasta they would eat. Eventually, that was co-opted by the wealthy people in Italy, okay? And somehow through the decades or whatever like that, it became something that only the upper class people you know, the echelon within Italian society would eat, right? And then of course later on with industrialization and all that stuff like that, then it became more accessible to the wider audience. But it still very much retains that that idea of being attached to the wealthy upper class in Italy, right? But it was originally appropriated from those peasant people and their idea of what they created. So that's a way in which like an economic appropriation kind of class dynamic there, but that's a form of appropriation as well.
Fair question.
So I'm wondering, how do you guys think like what the appropriate way of like, so say I wanted braids, right? And I'm not a public figure or a celebrity or anything, and don't have the opportunity to explain myself as much as someone interviewed, like I'm not on the red carpet being interviewed asking why my hairstyle is. How would it be, how would you suggest to go about, you know, sporting the hairstyle without offending everyone and making it culturally?
Well, first, the question is, are you in solidarity with the people that this hairstyle comes from? So I guess not a direct answer, but an example is within gay culture, like a lot of gay languages or queer language is being appropriated, or it's seeping into mainstream culture. So things like yas, slay, throwing shade, all that came from like drag scenes and ballroom culture. And that's perfectly fine to use if you are in solidarity with us. If you show up to your local drag bar and you like tip the performers and you like, you know, participate and are in solidarity in that space, that's perfectly fine. But if you're, say, like Michelle Bachmann, I'm gonna be extremely offended if she says something like throwing shade. Does that make sense? Like, yeah.
But it's kind of hard to get permission, right? You can't ask the individual person to kind of say it's okay for you to do something. Like, you know, I'm from Africa, but I still can't say like, yeah, girl, go ahead, get the braids, right? You know what I mean? It's something that, I mean, this time and age and whatever, I think we're gonna have to do a lot more evolving in our society, and there has to be a lot more equalization and equity that happens in the United States before we can truly ever get to a point where we can have these cultural exchanges with each other, you know, to be honest.
I got one thing for Thomas real quick before we go, not to get too far off the subject. What is solidarity? Just because I show up, say I show up to a gay bar. Am I?
Well, if someone said something homophobic, are you going to stand up for that person? If there was a protest or something happening, are you going to show up and be a body there? Are you actively politically engaged to be in solidarity with like marginalized people? Are you friends with marginalized people? Are you making your spaces safe for marginalized people? Do you call out like racism, homophobia in your own circles? That's being in solidarity. And so when you're in solidarity with like a marginalized community, it feels more comfortable sharing like aspects of my culture. Yeah.
To kind of respond to what you were saying, we're not, I mean, even those of us who might kind of respond negatively to somebody appropriating our culture, it's not like we're like fully formed, perfectly kind of, you know, logical people who kind of know everything and have all the answers. No, we're all kind of, you know, we're trying to figure this out, right? I mean, that's what being human is, right? It's a long process. So in a sense, like I would think the best approach would be to always remain open to conversation, remain open to critique, and not kind of like, oh, you know, how dare you, how could you? Open up, because that conversation might actually cause one to look at oneself differently. And once you look at yourself differently, maybe there's scope for change, there's scope for deepening the kinds of things like solidarity. I mean, what does it mean to partake in a particular culture? Maybe a deepened understanding would mean then I don't have to wear this to prove something, or I don't have to wear this, you know, ignorantly, but I can actually truly appreciate and understand what it means symbolically to the people to whom it has meaning, for whom it has meaning. That sort of thing, just being open.
And people want to share culture. Like culture isn't something that like just like, you know, people of color want to like huddle for themselves and keep safe. Like we want to share it. It's just a matter of respect and power, and how if we share this thing, is someone else going to be celebrated for being cultured instead of like the person that they took that piece of culture from?
So in the essence of time, we'll move on and hit, there's a few with the upcoming Halloween holiday. We have a few topics maybe we can touch on. I don't know that we'll get to our third topic of food, but I will do my best. So I'll briefly go over a couple of these in fashion. Katy Perry, Appropriation, Appreciation. I saw where that one was going. I know this is going to elicit a couple of responses from a couple of people. Twerking. Idil, you want to touch on that?
I mean, you just think about, you know, in this country, in the United States, being a black woman, and the ways in which our bodies are policed, our actions are policed, right? Dance has a huge role in black culture, not just in African American culture, but in Africa as well, right? And it's a way that we bond, it's a way that we have fun, and it's a way that we express ourselves. And so when our form of expression, right, particularly in the U.S., when you think about dance, you know, it's kind of limited to what acceptable dance is these classical things, right? Like ballet, or like, what is that new style they have, the expression thing that they do? Modern, contemporary expression, dancing, whatever, right? Okay. But twerking and hip-hop dancing and crumping and all of these things, these are not things that the United States particularly celebrates, right, as part of its culture. But it is something that in the African American community is a huge part of the culture there. And so when people like Miley Cyrus, who don't understand the culture, don't respect the culture, and doesn't stand up for the culture, goes on national TV and twerks, right? And people think it's cute. People think, oh, you know, she's so like shocking and da-da-da. But if a black woman did this, right? If a black woman went on national TV and twerked on a grown man with a wife and children, how would people react? How would people treat her?
If Nicki Minaj did this, she would be broken down.
Right. So things that, and the big issue with cultural appropriation is, and that frustrates people, is why is it acceptable for Miley Cyrus to do this, but not black girls, right? If a black girl does it, what is she, right? Is she being trashy? Is she being ghetto? Is she being like classless? You know, all of these things that black women are constantly being insulted with, right? But when Miley Cyrus does it, not only does she commodify this dance for herself and make tons of money from it, right? She co-opts its entire culture and kind of takes away all its meaning, right? But then she goes and she doesn't acknowledge anything about the people who practice this style of dancing, right? So it was just very, very problematic. It was very distasteful, and just maybe not like twerking.
Okay.
Anybody else?
This one's gonna elicit a little bit of response, so context in this is Beyonce. I didn't know this picture existed, shows you how well I'm up on my pop culture. So going back to, and I think it's the next photo, so Julianne Hough, Crazy Eyes from Orange is the New Black, there's a huge problem with this, right? Is there still the same huge problem with Beyonce, who's black, going darker, blackface? I know what the response is from the panel because we've talked, but
and
the
what
question...
Beyonce is doing is slightly different than cultural appropriation. I mean, she is a member of the culture, but what she's doing is a form of appropriation, right? It's a little bit different than what's her name is doing. Yeah.
And feel free to talk about it. This is one that Idil had brought up that I didn't know about, so that's why I put it on here to kind of go to the question of, can the same cultures appropriate each other?
Right, which goes back to kind of the question that someone was asking earlier, right? Can we you appropriate within a race or a culture or whatever. And so, like, I mean, this is Beyonce, and she did a fashion kind of piece or whatever, like a spread, for Vogue, right? Was it Vogue?
I think it was Vogue magazine.
And so the fashion spread was about this queen in Africa who lived like some, years ago or whatever. And so this queen, she's a dark-skinned woman, right? And so in the Black community, because of white supremacy and structural racism, we have issues such as colorism, right? Beyonce is a very light-skinned woman, right? And she's been very successful in part due to the fact that she fits very much into the European kind of standards of beauty, right? So Beyonce goes and does this spread, and because she does not really match the skin tone of this queen, whoever did this the spread decided, oh, well, let's just, darken Beyonce, right? And so, like, I mean, when I first saw it, I was appalled, right? Because I just felt it was very inappropriate. It was inappropriate because Beyonce was appropriating something, an experience, basically, that was not hers, right? The experiences of dark-skinned Black women in the United States and across the world is completely different than the experience of light-skinned Black women who conform to this Western European standards of beauty, right? And Beyonce herself, I don't think she even acknowledged what she was, because there was a whole controversy, right, Thomas?
I think,
she didn't acknowledge it, really?
I don't know if I remember this correctly, but I think what happened here was this wasn't like Beyonce putting on darker foundation. I think they digitally enhanced the image without her knowing. But I might be wrong there.
No, that was the makeup one or something. This is where, like, because she's not painted fully Black because her hands and the rest of her are not painted that color. They only painted like her face and her like throat and chest area.
If you can even see her hands. I'm using my later porn. I'm excited. That's not like it's just the face area. If you look at other images of it, it's just
yeah. So I found it particularly problematic. And so when you think about appropriation, you think about power dynamics. They're very complex in our world, right? It's not just white and Black. There's also power dynamics that exist within communities of color. And in this particular case, Beyonce being a very, like Kim Kardashian, a very wealthy, well-known woman who I'm pretty sure is smart and knows what she's doing, should have taken the time to perhaps tell the photographer, pick a model who is fitting of the actual.
And just a quick point on this. A lot of times in like these photo shoots, when a darker skinned woman is on the cover, they either make the cover black and white or they digitally enhance her to make her lighter. So like I think Lupita was like involved in this, like they digitally enhanced her image on a cover of a magazine. There are other people, I just can't remember their names right now.
I would like to say two things. First thing, you can take it both ways. For one, whoever was the editor or the creator who had this vision, at least they did use a Black woman. But coming from a standpoint of somebody who happens to be Black, I believe this is appropriation because there are so many different shades of beauty. There are so many different shades of Black. Was there not a beautiful, gorgeous female individual out of the 8 billion people on this planet that was Black enough to fit the criteria to carry out the vision of this person? And by saying the vision of this person, that leads me to my next point. In the world of business or capitalism or whatever, if you have a dream, you have a vision, don't let the impact of your vision diminish your morality or your integrity. Because whereas you could think, oh man, this will reach people across the world. Yes, Beyonce is worth $500 million. Her and her husband combined are worth $1 billion. But they have such a great influence on people. But what is your influence doing? Is your influence helping the people see more clearly? Are they more knowledgeable of the subject at hand? Or are they just laying by the wayside and just not knowing what's really going on here? Because if I actually saw Beyonce in person like this, I would be like, why? That would be the first question in my head, why? I know I don't understand exactly what that culture is. And who's to say she doesn't understand exactly what that culture is, you know? But why? There is somebody black enough, and not like black, like light black and dark black, but actually black enough, beautiful enough, in a black skin complexion to fit the criteria. It doesn't have to be somebody of a completely astronomical tax bracket to get your point across. So forth and so on. So yes, that does coincide with your question about can people of relatively same cultures appropriate each other? Yes.
Questions? Comments? Okay, now we move on to the fun stuff. Halloween's coming up. This wasn't hard either. If you Google celebrity Halloween costumes, you can have a field day. I'll kind of go through these because we're up against a little bit of a time crunch, but I'll blow through them and we'll talk to you guys.
I have a question about this one specifically,
Yeah.
kind of, or I guess Halloween costumes in general. Is I could understand where someone's coming from when they say this is cultural appropriation, but if I was, I mean, I don't know, I'll use Disney princesses because they're an easy example. If a child who happens to be Black, Asian, whatever, wants to be brave, right, Pocahontas, exactly, any of them, is that equally considered cultural appreciation? Because I'm assuming Julianne Hough chose Crazy Eyes because she probably likes the character or enjoys the show, what have you. So if she enjoys the character just as much as a black little girl enjoys Mulan, would we say that the black girl who wants to be Mulan is culture? Like,
What is wrong with this picture right now? When you look at this picture, what is wrong with it?
She's wearing blackface.
Yeah.
yeah, I can't tell. She has a.
So,
So like with this one,
She has a black face. I can't tell.
yeah, that's real blackface. That's like the main problem with it. It wouldn't have been a problem, or like it might have still been a problem. It wouldn't have been nearly as bad of a problem had she stayed blonde and just like put her hair in the buns and just wore the costume. Everybody would have understood. Like I know there's a specific picture floating around of quote unquote Legos, and it's 3 white girls with cornrows, no blackface, like all this black outfit on, and they're amigos. And it's hilarious and it's done very, very tastefully. They even like have updated to have Cardi B in it. No one has, like the girl with Cardi B just has like a long straight black wig. No one has anything offensive on it. You know exactly who they're supposed to be, exactly who they're, I don't want to say imitating or mimicking, but like exactly who they are portraying themselves to be without anything disrespectful, without anything goofy. Like her hair, I don't know what color her hair was actually at that point in time, but you know that's not the color it's supposed to be. I don't know what's going on with her roots. That looks like it was some attempt to mimic Crazy Eyes' hair. It's just not done in a way that, like if I saw that and you're supposed to be me, I'd be very offended versus if you just showed up in like an all black outfit, your hair kind of braided back and being roots. Like you can mimic somebody, like you were saying with the princesses, like if I wanted to be Mulan, then I could put on a Mulan costume, but I don't have to go out and buy 002 of CoverGirl's foundation to lighten my skin and look like her, or do my makeup to make my eyes look like smaller like Mulan's would. Like you can do it in a way that's showing you know exactly who you're supposed to be without having to do that.
I think the next image, if I'm remembering correctly, will bring up kind of the Pocahontas point. When is it appropriate? Is it appropriate for a child or, appropriate for a child or an adult? Is there a difference? If a child does it, is it okay? We're all gonna say Paris Hilton probably isn't appreciating the culture. But if a child does it, to your point, dresses up as Pocahontas, is that okay? Throw it out to the audience and panel.
So I think the difference here, and I don't have the firm answer, is that this is Paris Hilton dressed up as a Native American, and so culture is never a costume, and that's never okay because you go into it with the intention of being a costume. Now a character, if say, I don't know, Paris Hilton dressed up as Pocahontas, I feel like that would be a little bit different. She could do that tastefully because she would be dressing up as like Pocahontas and not just Native American. And so, yeah, I think for children, if they go into it like dressing up as the character without having to do like blackface or like having to do like stereotypical like Asian eye makeup for Mulan, like that's okay. That's just my thought.
Is it somewhat okay because she didn't paint her face? What if she would have painted her face?
Well, this is still her going into it like with the intention of being a costume of Native Americans, and
I mean, she's sexualizing something that is supposed to be a significant, like culturally significant.
I didn't go down that road.
You know what I mean? I mean,
I cropped out the other one, so
I mean,
go down that
it's
road.
both commodification that exists with cultural appropriation, and then there's the sexualization of other cultures as well. That's another component of cultural appropriation. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to clarify. So when you're saying dressing as Pocahontas, if you were referring to a Disney character who has little to do with the real Pocahontas, can we add Disney's portrayal of Pocahontas? Because she would not be dressing up as Pocahontas.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's a really significant clarification from an American Indian perspective.
I was gonna say, like, then do you think like age is a factor in it? Because obviously little kids aren't considering this, they don't know the difference. I mean, I remember in elementary school around Thanksgiving, we would make weird like feather hats out of like paper and whatever, and like half the class would be pilgrims, half the class would be Indians, and like none of the teachers, none of them, we were 5 years old, like we didn't think anything of it. Yeah, I understand like she's sexualizing that, which that's like a totally different topic, but like at the same time, kids aren't considering these things. I mean, parents are helping you paint your face, like they're helping you portray these characters and whatever. They're not thinking of it as being offensive. They're thinking of it because they want to be like their favorite Disney character.
But think about how you're training children, right? So you grow up in a society, and the things that you do as a child, right, you carry through into adulthood. If you're a parent or a educator, a teacher in a school, it's not appropriate for you as an adult who should understand and conceptualize these things in society, right? These power dynamics, the historical significance of things, for you to then teach these children, right, something that is problematic in itself. So there's no blame on the child because they are a child and they do not understand these things, but that doesn't take away from the issue of adults in society who do understand these things.
Someone
teaching
bought that
these
costume.
children. Right.
Or made it.
And children need to be taught these things.
As a parent, I can just share this with you guys. I mean, my daughter is in elementary school, and for one of the events last year, and actually I find the kids' engagement with this to be far more serious and interesting, and they're actually much more sincere about this. I don't know, Paris Hilton, I guess just by being Paris Hilton she's offensive, but this is even adding to it, right? But I'm just wondering, like, so when my daughter had an event that she wanted to, she had a list of historical personalities that she could take on the role of and dress up like, right? And she chose Harriet Tubman. And I said, okay, so how are we gonna do this, right? So what do? We went to the bookstore and got a book. We sat down, read it together. It was a kid's book, and that process helped because then she got to kind of understand who Harriet Tubman was. It wasn't just an outfit, wasn't just a kind of a way to kind of look a certain way, etc., etc. It wasn't just about playing the part. It was about learning something about history, and she pulled it off pretty nicely, and I was surprised because as a kid she seemed more interested in the person Harriet Tubman than the caricatured kind of the image that one would have in these kinds of contexts. I don't think any of these adults, and I'm going to say this, it's all celebrities. It's all like these millionaire, billionaire people. Why are we?
I pick celebrities to keep
I'm just saying that we do this, right? We draw so much from this particular kind of space, and I don't know if any of them even think beyond like a few seconds about the kind of implications of their actions. But I think kids do a lot more that we can learn from, I think.
Bob?
Thank you.
While I agree with what everyone's saying, I think also you can argue that kids wanting to dress up like a Disney princess who isn't, of the same nationality or ethnicity as them, you can also almost argue that it's like they're idolizing them and they're, like they think she's the most, okay, a little white girl wants to be Moana and she thinks she's the prettiest princess, you know what I'm saying? So you can almost say like, that's them appreciating and wanting to, I don't know, be like them or something. And also you can argue like, well, adults should know what they're teaching their kids and, in a classroom setting. You can also say that by making those hats and stuff like that, while it may not be as appropriate, it's still at a lower level, but it's teaching them about the culture, so it's exposing them to other cultures other than their own, so that they, there's a way to do it, but,
I have a quick.
Also, he's been holding.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I would say, going back to the school thing, my experience, so, my mom's side of the family comes from, Mexico. They were in New Mexico before it was, part of America's territory, but what my Spanish classes were teaching about culture was completely different than my family's reality. And when they were, so they were teaching them this idolized, like, glorification version of Mexican culture. Yeah, a westernized version of Mexican culture that's not what my family went through. That's not, so that's like something like in schools, like it's teaching them, but I know people who they have this view of Mexican culture is completely skewed, and it's because when they go to Mexico, they're in nice areas, they're staying with rich families. My Spanish teacher were teaching them like all the great positive aspects, but there's none of the negative that my family had to go through. That's something that I just,
I was gonna say, Alex has a fantastic point. So we're talking about Thanksgiving and the whitewashed Western version of Thanksgiving being some happy supper that everybody sat down on, and we're basically glossing over the whole fact that for hundreds of years and still to this day we commit atrocities against the people that are indigenous to this land, and we just sit there and celebrate them once a year with feathers on our head like it's okay. So I don't think it's okay for kids to dress up as a Native American. Melissa brought up a great point, if you dress up as Pocahontas, I think it's still on the parents to tell them the difference between that as a Disney character and that as a historical figure. So I also think it's on educators to tell their students, we have this culture out there that we're still committing atrocities against instead of just whitewashing and forgetting the history that was going on.
Thomas, did you want to say something?
Just about like the Moana thing, there was controversy because Disney had produced these Maui costumes where it was like a muscle suit but it had all the tattoos on it, and that Polynesian people like explicitly stated that they did not approve of that, but Disney still did it anyways. So you should also make sure to like acknowledge what sacred things are part of like the costume that you're looking into. But also like very much agree with Lauren's point.
She got her.
I just feel like just in general, a lot of people are like kind of putting a little bit of blame on the kids. And I doubt any kid, like she's saying, like wants to dress as like Maui. I doubt any 5-year-old is thinking, oh, these tattoos are sacred. I cannot wear this, because they have no idea. So it's more like a parental
Put the
issue.
responsibilities on
Yeah,
the responsibilities on the people putting it out.
Yeah.
What
to
you
know
allow
that.
children to do when they're young, like so when you're a child, your parents have responsibility to form you into a decent human being, right? So if you're not teaching your children about the injustices, about the inequalities that exist within a society, about how to be a fair and just person in a society, then you're failing your child and you're making it acceptable for them to continue to disregard the feelings of marginalized people. So it's not necessarily we're saying these children are like adults almost, like they're responsible for what they're doing. What we're saying is the ways in which children are raised and influenced by their parents extremely affects their character, right? If you use the N-word all the time at home, what is that child gonna do when they're older? Are they gonna think that that word is a, you know, harmful, disgusting word that shouldn't be used? Or are they gonna find it appropriate because my mom did it, my dad did it, right? If you talk in front of your children about how you hate Muslims, right? And then when they're 10 or 15, they go and those prejudices come up and they are mean to a Muslim kid at school, right? They think it's okay. Or dress up as a terrorist, right?
Wait, you mean
so
like that?
they do these things. Yeah, like that. So they do these things, and then, you know, they're gonna be like, oh, it's okay because my parents did it. So you have a responsibility as a parent to educate your children properly, because not all education is good education. You want to educate your children in the proper, correct manner.
So coming from two perspectives, so one, I study child development. So that's what I do, so like how they learn about the world. And also, so as a kid, I loved Pocahontas. That was my favorite movie as a kid. I watch it now, it just makes me sad. But as a kid, that was my favorite movie. And so I feel like parents should take that. Like, I was obsessed with Pocahontas. I was obsessed with American Indians. I really, to use that to like, okay, this is what you like, and to like teach them about like the reality of what the culture is. So like taking the child's interest in Moana to teach them about specifically that culture. And then basically what he was talking about, where they went and they read about Harriet Tubman, and then they dressed up in an appropriate way where they had that full conceptualization. So you're allowing the child to learn more about the world and the reality and the wholeness of what it is, as opposed to like this simple westernized, easily digestible version of what we want to believe everything is, because it's easy to understand.
Just as a side point, whenever I think about people dressing up as non-white people, non-black people dressing up as Harriet Tubman, I think of Alec Baldwin's Harriet Tubman.
Also, in reference to what he just said, for those of you, who may think about the blackface minstrels, those were white people who painted their faces black in relation to capitalize on the black people's downfall of enslavement through music. So when you think about that, or you appreciate or you appropriate, and it's definitely an appropriation. So don't let your child go out and into the world, oh man, I'm this magical character. Let them have all the fun. But then again, they're gonna grow up and somebody's gonna let them know that was wrong. Or somebody's gonna ask you, why did you let your child do that?
So Colton dressed up as Kanye and Gandhi. Put those in perspective.
That's kind of tag on to what you just said. It's interesting because there's appropriation, and then there is this kind of this deliberate, demeaning, dehumanizing action that's also part of it. Right? I think that's where we need to kind of also keep our kind of our eyes open to, right? Which is that act is that act on the one hand taking from another culture, or is that act taking but also taking and doing something that is dehumanizing that other culture, dehumanizing people, looking at them in ways that reproduces the sort of the inequalities and the hatreds that we see in the world. So in a sense, I mean, we can think. I mean, for example, yeah, I mean, Gandhi. Am I offended? No, I'm this not particularly, but at the same time, it's sort of like, okay, you're doing this. Would I wish for the person doing this outfit to learn about Kali and Hindu theology? Not particularly. I don't care about it myself. But I think this is, again, does it cross the line where it's just simply kind of trying to look like, or is it going beyond that and saying, I'm trying to look like, but I'm also doing something that's dehumanizing, putting down people and demeaning them in a certain way, right? That's a question also we should ask.
I was gonna say that picture of Chris Brown, I don't even think that's going farther than cultural appropriation. That's just completely disrespectful, and that's terrible. I don't know what his angle was, or like any type of respect that he, or like humor that he thought he was gonna get out of that. Like, a totally different topic, but like, I'm just very fixated on this. I'm not sure why that was okay.
And a lot of
just is
times
kind of ridiculous.
that's what those Halloween costumes do. Like you see like sexy geisha, and it's just like not even an actual Japanese dress, it's a Chinese dress. So like it's you remove things from their cultural context, you like essentially bastardize them.
And there's nothing sexy about being a geisha. I mean, historically looking at what's happening, like a sexy squaw, like, you know, like there was nothing sexy about those women that were, you know, Native American and who were being taken as wives by white settlers who were being mistreated within the communities they were forced to live in because of their new husband. Oftentimes men that they did not want to be with, but were basically sold off. So.
Well, I was gonna say too, and because like there's a huge problem with people associating all Muslims with negative connotations. Like half of my family's Muslim, like they're from Turkey. So, you know, whatever, and like my friends will like make jokes about it and whatever. I'm like, I'm personally not a Muslim, but half of my family is, and so, you know, like I have an appreciation for that because you can't just associate all Muslims with some negative connotation, especially terrorism. So that to me is just disgusting. Like, you just
I would say I agree with her, everything she said for this picture, but I take offense to the picture after this. Like we said, it's depicting Kanye West. I find it very offensive. I mean, he just went too far. All he could have done was buy a shirt that Kanye West has worn before, buy the same shirt, and you would have known, watch a video, watch him see a picture of Kanye West, you know, oh, he's trying to be like Kanye West, but you go like holding out your arts, canyon fade, the chain, the glasses, I mean, everything. I mean, I just find it very offensive.
So you just wonder sometimes, like in all of these images, one thing is, if you wonder, whose gaze is being satisfied, or who is the intended audience for this performance, right? I mean, each one of these individuals, they're taking on a certain kind of, you know, they're performing something, right? But who they're performing for? I mean, that's a question also to ask, right? Is it feeding into, for example, the gaze of a racist, or a sexist, or a misogynist, or a homophobe, right? I mean, those are the kinds of questions we should also ask, right?
So we're up against time. I just wanted to kind of, I can't tie all this together. I think we had a great conversation. I don't know that there necessarily is a solid answer. I don't know that anyone's going to walk away with one. But I think the point of this panel and this group was really, it ties back to the whole overarching theme of Diversity Inclusion Week, and it's let's talk. And really, this was a great conversation. We got some, I think we poked a few bears and got a few things, got some people thinking, and that's really was just the point, was just to think about it. With Halloween coming up, with what you or how you dress as a costume, just think before you really do it. Are you doing it with the right intention, or what's the reasoning behind it? So, with that said, I'd like to thank our panel for taking time today. And I would put them out there and say they can stick around and ask some questions, but I know they have class, so they will be heading out shortly thereafter. But thank you for your time. Your little survey questions, if you can fill those and drop them off in the back. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, come take an anthropology class so you can learn more about this stuff.
That's what I made yesterday.